In order for you to be his follower, you have to renounce control of every single resource that you have. And you have got to say, none of it is mine anymore. It all belongs to you. We're going to dive into something just a little bit different. Something that I'll just freely acknowledge to you has the potential to be slightly awkward. Now y'all know there ain't no awkward moments anywhere like awkward moments in church. I've been a part of a number of them. I have created a lot of them. During one of my summers in college, I was involved in this really, really small and kind of formal church for the summer, and it was in service one Sunday, and the pastor was up there doing something, and all of a sudden it got really, really quiet. I think he was looking for something, or he was trying to figure out what came next, but it just got kind of awkwardly quiet, and I noticed that my friend beside me was not paying any attention. But when things get really quiet, you know how it suddenly gets your attention, and he looks up, and I can tell he just kind of roused back, and so I looked over at him, I said, the pastor just called on you to pray. And he's like, really? I said, yeah, he said, called on you right now to pray. So he just stands up and just starts praying, over the whole congregation. It was one of my best and most awkward moments that I've ever created in church. Brian Loritz, who has preached here a lot at the Summit Church, tells a story about his dad, Crawford Loritz, who also has preached here, that did this year. But he said, but when his dad was a kid, his dad grew up in church like I did, where, back then we didn't have cool children's church and kids ministry things with airplanes hanging out the ceiling and that kind of stuff like that. It was just, you just sat through church, right? 3 full services a week, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I sat through just adult church from the time that I was 3 years old. And so you came up with all kinds of ways to entertain yourself. I knew how many tiles were on the ceiling of my church. I would, count toupees and blue hair wigs and whatever it took to be able to maintain my interest. Well, Crawford, Dr. Loritz says he was like that. And he said I was a pretty rambunctious kid. He said one Sunday morning, and I'll just read you exactly what he said. Crawford said, one Sunday morning, the preacher was up there preaching his heart out, and the whole time I was consumed by one thought. What would happen if I told the preacher to shut up? My feet couldn't even touch the ground in front of the pew, but I couldn't get this thought out of my mind. I just kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it until I thought, maybe the Lord wants me to do this. Finally, he said, I just had to do it. So I waited for a very somber moment in his message, and I belted out, oh, shut up. Crawford says that pandemonium ensued in that church. He said everybody in the church thought it was hilarious, but his mama was sitting right next to him, and in this very discreet way, he just reached over and just pinched a huge hunk of flesh out of my arm and whispered in my ear, boy, when I get you home, and Crawford says, I can't even say the rest because times have changed, and I don't want you calling CPS on my mom. But Crawford says it was my most awkward moment in church. Well, this morning, I want to create about a 40-minute awkward moment in church because I want to talk about, wait, what? Some of you are mouthing sex. No, I'm not going to talk about sex. We're going to do that in the spring, okay? That'll be awkward too. But today, I want to talk about money. Everybody's favorite sermon series is always about money. Now, let me tell you 3 reasons I am not preaching on this. First, this is not some kind of passive-aggressive way that I'm asking for a raise. This church takes fantastic care of me, and I got no complaints. Second, I'm not doing this because this church is behind budget and I got to beat the bushes to try to make ends meet. In fact, I'm very happy to be able to say to you, I'm just full of thanks to God and to you that because of your generosity, we're doing great. I mean, sure, there are a lot of things that we believe God has for us in the future, and they are faith goals for us, and we want to go there, and in order to do that, we got to go together, and God's going to use our obedience and sacrifice to get there, but we're not approaching this subject like God needs us to raise money for him. God is never in that position. Thirdly, I'm not doing this because I'm trying to get you to buy into some, you can live your best life now, get rich quick church Ponzi scheme where you give here, I get a private jet, and then I promise you that when you do that brand new Range Rover with the 26-inch rims will just materialize in your driveway, and the fillings in your teeth will transmogrify into gold, and then you'll just be happy living your best life now. We do not give. Let me make this clear. We do not give to get back from God. If that is why you give, you're not giving to God, you're giving to yourself. Scripture does say that God will often multiply our resources when we give. But he does so, if you read the context, he does so that we will have even more to give. In other words, we give to get back so that we can give even more. So if those are the three reasons we're not doing this, why would I take time to go through this? Well, it's because one of our values here at the Summit Church is that we want to make disciples, not just converts. We want to raise up a generation of fully committed disciples, not just gather a large group of attenders each weekend. And this is one of the most crucial dimensions of discipleship. Did you know that Jesus talked more about our relationship with money than he did prayer and faith combined? He talked more about this subject than he did heaven and hell combined. He brings this subject up in more than 40% of his parables and 40% of his teachings on the kingdom. Y'all, if I preached on money as often as Jesus did, it would be every third sermon. Just say it. Jesus' most dire warnings were about money. He implies again and again throughout the Gospels that a selfish spirit will keep us out of heaven. It's a huge theme in Luke where we are going to spend some time today. He says, for example, in Luke 18, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. There is nothing else he says that kind of thing about. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person, which would basically, by the way, apply to all of us to go into the kingdom of God. He tells listeners in Luke 14, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Again, he doesn't talk that way about anything else. In order for you to be his follower, you have to renounce control of every single resource that you have. And you have got to say, none of it is mine anymore. It all belongs to you. That's the only thing that he talks about in those kinds of terms. He tells people in Luke 12, watch out, be on your guard against greed. Again, here's the thing. He never talks like that about adultery. He never talks that way about lying. I don't know any place where he says, be on guard against adultery and be on guard against lying. Why do you think he doesn't talk that way about those things? Well, I think it's because with those sins, you know you've crossed the line when you've crossed it. But greed is subtle. Usually we don't realize that we've crossed the line until we are miles beyond it. That's interesting. Studies done in the American church show that we Americans will freely admit to all kinds of sins. Man, we're free to say, I struggle with pride, I struggle with lust, I struggle with anger, I struggle with prejudice, I struggle with bitterness toward people. But almost none of us, it's almost kind of crazy when you look at the statistics, almost none of us say we have any problem with greed at all. In Luke 16, our passage for today, here's what Jesus says. Look at this. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other. They're mutually exclusive. If you love one, you're going to hate the other one. And if you're devoted to the one, you're going to despise the other. You simply cannot serve both God and money. Again, Jesus doesn't talk that way about anything else, where one, love of one, forces out the love of the other. This subject has a way of getting to the heart like nothing else does. So the primary reason that we do this, Summit family, is not fundraising. It is because you simply cannot be a disciple without dealing with this, because this issue gets at the heart of what you love and what you worship and what kingdom you're living for and who you're following like nothing else does. In fact, it is to the point that I've told you that even if we had no financial need at this church, if this morning over at the Apex campus, underneath the first-time guest tent, they discover an oil reserve, right? There's a little black seepage and up from the ground comes a bubbling crude, and the next thing you know, we're all millionaires. If that happens, we will still do this every November. Why? Because we know it's not about supplying God's financial needs. God does this because he knows this gets at the heart of what we really love and follow more than anything else does. It's also why I tell you that if this is a struggle for you to sit here and hear this, maybe you grew up somewhere that you saw this abused, or maybe you can't get past thinking this is some kind of manipulative way where I try to get money out of your pockets and into mine. What I tell you, and I say this almost every time, and I'm very, very serious about this. If that's you and you can't get past thinking that way, why don't we just for the next few weeks, why don't we take giving to the Summit Church off the table? And why don't you respond to this, not by giving here, but why don't you respond to this by giving into the kingdom of God somewhere else? Because I do not want that cynicism or that difficult situation that you were through. I don't want that to become an insurmountable obstacle for you becoming an actual disciple of Jesus. And so I'm asking you, if that's you right now and you're like, I hate this, I feel like I want to get up and walk out. Let's just right now take giving to the Summit Church off the table. And yes, I've had church consultants tell me it is crazy for me to say that. And they're like, do not say that. I'm saying it, okay? Because it is more important for me that you become an actual disciple of Jesus. I'm trusting God's gonna take care of us. And yes, obviously, if God calls you to this church, you should be at a church where you love and trust and feel like you can be a part of it and feel good about where you're giving. And if that's not this place, you should find somewhere else. So yeah, I'm not saying that's a healthy place to be long term. But what I'm saying is right now, if you just can't get past this, take giving to the Summit Church off the table and you apply everything that I'm saying by giving generously somewhere else, because it's more important for me that you become an actual disciple of Jesus than it is for you to let that obstacle keep you from becoming a disciple and cause you to miss the kingdom of God.